I want to compare four situations here that was taking place with Wall Street and corruption. The first one was years back. Martha Stewart got convicted of fraud or something, Wall Street fraud. It was all over TV for a year. She spent 5 months in jail and then 5 more months of house arrest, and all over TV. All right, so that was the first incident. But my point is, how much does it cost for immunity so you don't have to go to jail? Well, apparently they wanted to put Martha Stewart in jail, so that was the first incident. The second one was Bernie Madoff that got arrested for a Ponzi scheme, $50 billion or whatever. He got busted December 8, 2008, and it was all over the media kinda, and he went to jail. So then we come to 2010, the media is starting to report about all these bank frauds and everything else that took place on Wall Street. On July 15th, Goldman Sachs was fined $550 million. That's $550 million, and nobody went to jail.
$550 million.
The largest penalty assessed against a Wall Street.
Goldman Sachs' highest-ranking executives are being grilled about whether the firm profited at the expense of its own clients during Wall Street's financial crisis. It's a low point in the long history of America's most storied investment bank.
Is that the price of immunity? That kind of money?
You are betting against the very security that you're selling to them. You don't disclose that.
I don't think our clients care, or they should care.
That you are betting against the security you're selling to them? You don't think that's relevant to a client?
The people who were coming to us for risk in the housing market wanted to have a security that gave them exposure to the housing market, and that's what they got. The unfortunate thing is that the housing market went south very quickly, and so people lost money in it.
Front running, trading ahead of your clients to profit from the price changes that will come from the client's trades, but for your own firm's benefit. And isn't that, strictly speaking, illegal?
And out of that $550 million, $300 million went to the U.S. Treasury Department. I want to lead to the fourth story, which is the biggest story of all, which is a lawsuit against the SEC commissioners again with the CMKX Diamond shareholders. The case is worth $3.87 trillion, and it involves counterfeiting of shares on Wall Street. In 2006, in a hotel in Las Vegas, they trapped all these bankers for naked short selling counterfeit shares, made them all pay up, and they got to walk away scot-free. This was very important, where Al talks to the judge on August 2nd. He's talking to the judge. They had a room about 3 times the size of your courtroom, in which they had representatives from all of these brokerages from all over the world. They watched a video presentation because Mr. Mayhew, as the court may be aware, was at one time closely associated with the CIA, Howard Hughes, and all kinds of other people. And then the judge turns around and says to Al Hodges, after this comment, the judge says, "I was going to ask you whether that was the same Bob Mayhew." In other words, the judge knew how famous this Bob Mayhew was. They were offered an opportunity to either pay a reasonable amount for each transaction conducted illegally, or to walk out of the venue subject to criminal prosecution. They were also placed on notice that the U.S. government was watching them and warned to refrain from any future illicit and illegal behavior. Each attendee paid. The question to the American people and the news media, the TV news media, was Bernie Madoff in that room in 2006 when they let all them bankers walk away scot-free? These are allegations made by Al Hodges in a federal courthouse in California. They were busted, they tracked them down. but they paid the money to walk out the door free. So they paid for immunity. Here is the TV news media to follow this story and find out who was in that room, and if there really is a trust fund worth $3.87 trillion.
This is unprecedented. It's the greatest bank robbery in world history, and the banks are doing the robbing. The people are not going to tolerate.
My point about this whole story is how they let the bankers walk free out of that room in Las Vegas in 2006. Now, what if I robbed a bank in Massachusetts, then drove down to New York, robbed another bank, ended up in Florida, decided to rob another bank with a friend of mine, and they caught me. They got me in this room, and I tell them, okay, you caught us, you got us on videotape, but I got the money in the trunk from the other banks. If I give you the money back, will you let me go? So it's the same story as the bankers in Las Vegas.
Guaranteeing these banks this year in 2010, $4 trillion. That means that these banks could go out like they're doing and keep playing these games, and no matter whether they win or lose, their bets are backed by the people. Washington is Wall Street, and Wall Street is Washington. Who's the Treasury head? Timothy Geithner. Where is he from? The New York Federal Reserve Bank. Who was the Treasury Secretary before him? Henry Paulson under Bush. Where was he from? Goldman Sachs. Only a child wouldn't see what's going on.
By the time you count credit default swaps, counterfeiting of securities, counterfeiting of American treasuries, and counterfeiting of other corporate bonds that are transmitted electronically, but in reality, a lot of them don't exist. It's probably the biggest theft in America's history.
We're trying to get our story out through blogging, since the news media will not cover the story. Yeah, so we have about 68 various types of inspector generals that are supposed to keep an eye on fraud and make the arrest of these people. And I assume David Kotz is the inspector general based out of the Security Exchange Commission. So he must be the main guy. And where are all the arrests of these Goldman Sachs employees and all the bankers that were allowed to walk out of that room in Las Vegas? We have it on CNN, iReports, most shared video all time, and not one TV news media has talked about it. But I can say that the story is slowly coming out. The past couple days, the banks and the attorney generals are filing lawsuits against the banks for fraud with the documentation. And also, our story needs to be told because they were counterfeiting shares all over Wall Street. The big picture, besides the CMKX lawsuit, is the overall counterfeiting by all these banks in every commodity you can think of. It was all fraudulent and counterfeiting going on. And now we need the TV news media to finally tell the truth. And the key point I'd like to mention is on Tuesday, September 28th, CNBC Erin Burnett finally reported for 5.5 minutes a video clip explaining how banks in America were funneling trillions of dollars through various parts of the world. It announced 12 different banks outside the United States, and some of this money is leading to terrorists, it's getting into terrorist hands. And this lawsuit that we're involved in is all about terrorism and money laundering and counterfeiting shares on Wall Street. It's naked short selling. This is what the banks did, and this is what this lawsuit's about. And how can it not be all over TV? And I went and watched Wall Street Money Never Sleeps Again for the second time. And what caught my eye yesterday watching it was when he said, time is the most valuable commodity. And in order to make these bankers pay for all their speculation and counterfeiting that they did with shares and mortgage fraud, it's starting to all come out on TV with the attorney generals all filing lawsuits against the banks, but not one of them is going to jail like Martha Stewart did or Bernie Madoff. Where is the Department of Justice to put these people in jail so they will lose the most valuable possession and commodity, which is their own time to spend behind bars? Where are the arrests of these bankers? And I'd just like to do a special shout out to a couple independent famous filmmakers, leave it to Hollywood to tell the business news to the world instead of CNBC, Bloomberg, and all the other business newspapers and everything else. When you got Oliver Stone making his movie, right? And it should be all over TV what his movie's about. And the other key one was Michael Moore, Capitalism, a Love Story, where he talked about the housing market. And now all this stuff is just starting to come on TV the last couple of days about the banks and fraud and the Attorney General filing all these lawsuits for every state that to represent the people of their state. And there's one movie that was neglected, which is The Naked Short Selling. I was a narrator to Stock Shock, and the media never covered it. Just like this world's largest lawsuit with our lawyer, Al Hodges, representing us in federal court in California, not one TV media has talked about naked short selling, counterfeit shares on Wall Street. That's what destroyed this country financially. And it's not being told on TV. Why?
We have not heard speeches by the president demanding that the frauds go to prison. We have not heard speeches from the Attorney General of the United States of America, Eric Holder. Indeed, we haven't heard anything. It's like Sherlock Holmes, the dog that didn't bark. And that's the dog that is supposed to be our guard dog. It must bark, and it must have teeth.
Is that the price of immunity?